Hello. So I chose question number 2. What should educators know about integrating language and subject learning in order to support student mindfulness of and about language? Um, Students need comprehensible input in order to learn the language and any other concept that they're trying to acquire. This means that preloading vocabulary and scaffolding more complex concepts is extra important when trying to teach content to EB students. If they don't have enough points of reference, it will all just combine into gibberish and be just impossible to decode. So, the first really important tactic is making sure that your input is comprehensible and they have enough quality comprehensible input. Um, Another one is producing language is very important in the process of acquisition and mindfulness around it, because when you are producing language, you have to be mindful of the audience. Um, so this means that it's really important to give students a chance to talk about a topic or idea, especially a new topic, and a chance to use that vocabulary that they are trying to acquire. So making room for small group discussions where students have the opportunity to talk to each other and practice using the language will help them do better in the content area than if they're just listening to lectures or just doing worksheets and just this kind of more passive forms of output. Talking isn't the only supports that they need. They also, another really important thing that can help is taking advantage of multiple modalities. This can include graphs, pictures, physical movements, hand gestures, music, videos, as well as just the classic reading, writing, speaking, and listening. This helps students create meaning in more complete ways and gain deeper understanding. And it also really helps to anchor the words for them, words and concepts, so that they remember better. Um, Even though it's really good to prep scaffolding beforehand, um, another really important thing that I read this week was um, having responsive scaffolding, or sometimes scaffolding for the scaffolding, which basically means, you might have prepped a lesson, but once you get in the moment, if being responsive to the student needs and what you're observing during the teaching of the lesson. So if there's specific areas where students are struggling, seems like there's a specific knowledge gap that maybe you hadn't anticipated, or the students are having trouble using the scaffold, they might need some responsive scaffolding in the moment that can help them um, get to the point where they're able to do the lesson. Um, so this means being listening and being responsive to your students. Okay, so for part 2, um, just took some notes while watching the videos related to each of the questions. So question 1 was, how were participants negotiating meaning during pair works? That was a big place where we saw students negotiating meaning. They got to struggle with language, they got to experiment with each other while they're also working to apply the scaffolding. So they're working within the scaffolding framework, but negotiating the meaning inside of that scaffolding. I noticed with the lesson about the animals, students, when they were doing pair work and getting to discuss with each other, students were going beyond the scaffold that was provided and were talking about the habitats which were, scaffolded for them and displayed on the board. So in that pair group moment, they got to challenge themselves and kind of push beyond just the simplicity of the framework that the teacher provided, which, is great. They weren't necessarily getting it completely right, and then the teacher would sometimes step in and help them with prepositions or help make it a complete sentence, but the students were connecting with the concept of habitats and with the animals. Also in pair work that was observed of 2 students answering questions together, you could see, this is in a different video, you could see the students testing things out, making mistakes, and then sometimes the other student stepping in and helping arrive at the right answer. And it felt very, collaborative and low stakes in a good way, where the students aren't feeling stressed to get it right, but are able to explore and work inside of language. Number 2, how was academic language being modeled? Academic language was modeled in a lot of different ways. So it was modeled through the learning objectives that were written on the board. It was also modeled, the teacher modeled it through the way they were talking in class discussion, and then it was also modeled in the scaffolding and the sentences provided. Number 3, describe the ways that thinking and language within the classroom were being scaffolded. So that was also, sentence frames, pictures, note cards, and modeling. Again, introducing the learning target seemed like a really good way to scaffold the thinking and thought process. Another great form was connecting to topics being discussed in other classes. That seems like a good way to kind of scaffold, because you're connecting to points of reference that you know that the students are going to have. 4, how are the habits of connection and habits of communication being facilitated? In the academic vocabulary development video, he reached out to the other teachers to find different connections to concepts of point of view. He also used collaborative learning with the exit slips, which seemed really great, and he talked in the video about prioritizing that, and actually with certain classes cutting down on other activities so they would have enough time to do that. So he really prioritized letting them work collaboratively as a way to make communicating a central objective for his teaching process. This gives the students chances to talk and to use academic language in conversation with each other before they're writing it or as they're writing it, and that seemed really important. How are the educators intentionally engaging in the required academic language of the lesson at the 3 levels? Definitely through sentence frames that can help model the correct grammar, which seemed really important. So the grammar is modeled and they get to practice it. They used word banks for student reference, having words written on the board, having note cards, and then using sentence frames to help them engage in discourse. And providing sentence frames, I thought one video was really cool. There's, videos where the sentence frames are simpler and are just about, inserting a word here to get this, basic grammar thing accomplished. But there are other sentence frames where it's prompting student thought and it's asking them their opinion. And I think that is really important for getting to those deeper levels of, discourse. So it's essentially modeling discourse to students. How are teachers informally assessing students' language and content knowledge? I would say most of the informal assessments seem to come from listening. There's teachers, when they're giving their students a lot of opportunities to talk, it gives the teachers a lot of opportunities to listen to the students and how they're doing. And especially when they're working in pairs and working in groups, also working on exit slips and, smaller assignments that can be turned in at the end of the day so teachers can assess how well they're doing.